Have you ever heard that saying, everything is bigger in Texas? Well, in Australia, everything is more deadly. This place isn't just known for its vast deserts and paradise-like beaches, but also for being home to an astonishingly disproportionate number of animals that could take you out in the blink of an eye. That's right, nature in Australia is no joke, and when it comes to venomous species, this country takes the crown. In fact, it has more venomous species than almost anywhere else in the world. And what's worse, many of them are lethal to humans. But wait, this is just the beginning. Australia is home to 20 of the 25 most dangerous snakes on the planet, including the 11 most deadly ones. Impressive, right? And that's not all. It's also home to one of the few birds known to have killed humans, the feared cassowary, a bird that looks like it came straight out of a horror movie. And as if that weren't enough, let's not forget the classics: the saltwater crocodile, the great white shark, venomous spiders, and jellyfish that can end your life in minutes. And if all this doesn't convince you that Australia is the land of no way, here's one more fact. It's home to some of the largest insects in the world, one of the few places where a pineapple could kill you if it falls from a tree, and it's the setting for the 3 largest wildfires of the 21st century. I could go on, but I think you're getting the idea. Now brace yourself, because what I'm about to tell you will leave you speechless. Prehistoric Australia was even more terrifying. And no, I'm not talking about when dinosaurs ruled the earth, but a more recent time, about 50,000 years ago, just when the first humans arrived in the region. Can you imagine it? Giant reptiles and land-dwelling crocodiles reigned in Australia, and things didn't look good for the newcomers. Back in those days, Australia wasn't dominated by mammals like the rest of the world. Here the top predators were reptiles, and they didn't mess around. From the moment you set foot on this land, you would realize something was terribly wrong. One of the most fearsome inhabitants was the Quin Kan, a land crocodile that could easily outrun you. This wasn't just a regular crocodile you'd find lounging on the riverbank. No, the Quincon was a true land predator, built to run on solid ground. This monster, which reigned during the Pleistocene, had a very peculiar skull that set it apart from modern crocodiles, and surprisingly long legs that allowed it to keep its body elevated off the ground and reach impressive speeds. As if that weren't enough, its feet ended in hooves, and its tail was flat, suggesting that although it lived mostly on land, it was also a competent swimmer. The adults of this species weren't exactly small. Most were about 3 meters long and weighed around 200 kilos, roughly the same as a medium-sized American alligator. But some specimens reached up to 6 meters and over 400 kilos. Imagine coming across this creature while strolling through the Australian savannah 50,000 years ago. You had no escape, and if it attacked you, you'd be in serious trouble. Its teeth weren't ordinary. They were designed to slice through meat like blades, serrated and compressed, perfect for tearing through the flesh of its prey. In fact, these teeth were similar to those of the fearsome theropod dinosaurs. With these tools, the Quin Kan could bring down animals much larger than itself with a single bite, ripping out huge chunks of flesh and muscle. And if you thought jumping into the water would save you, you were wrong. Despite being primarily land-based, there was evidence it was also an expert swimmer, making it a true nightmare, capable of catching you both on land and in water. With a predator like that, there was no safe place in ancient Australia. But don't think the Quin Kan was the only monster lurking in prehistoric Australia. Far from it. Also roaming these lands was the largest land lizard ever known, the Megalania. You might have heard of this reptile in recent years as it's gained some popularity. However, what you might not know is that it's no longer officially known as Megalania, but as Varanus priscus, meaning it was a giant species of monitor lizard. Despite this change in classification, the name Megalania is still widely used, probably because it's much more striking and fitting to describe this colossal beast. This means that at its minimum size, it was as long as a sea lion and as heavy as a reindeer. However, things get truly astounding when we consider its potential maximum dimensions. Some studies suggest it could have reached 7.9 meters in length, almost 8 meters. This would make it as long as the largest recorded anaconda, but with a key difference. It was up to 8 times heavier due to its robust build, weighing as much as 2 tons. Large Megalania probably didn't exceed 575 kilos, but that didn't make them any less terrifying. Besides its enormous size, this giant also had razor-sharp teeth, long and curved backward, perfect for grabbing and holding onto its prey. Like its living relatives, the monitor lizards, it's believed that Megalania used its powerful limbs and sharp claws to take down both prey and any unlucky individual that crossed its path. And as expected in Australia, Megalania was also likely venomous, thanks to its its lineage. All modern monitor lizards are considered venomous, and their venom works similarly to that of some snakes, acting as an anticoagulant that prevents blood from clotting, which can lead to shock and infections by keeping wounds open longer. Since the Komodo dragon, also known as the Komodo monitor, is Megalania's closest living relative, some paleontologists believe they shared similar hunting tactics, biting their prey, retreating, and letting the venom do the work. So even if you managed to escape a Megalania attack, your days were numbered. All of these traits make Megalania likely the worst creature you could have encountered in ancient Australia. Unless, of course, you have a mortal fear of snakes. If snakes give you the creeps, then the next beast is your worst nightmare come to life, the Wonambi. While its name might not sound that intimidating, it should strike fear in anyone who hears it because it was a giant snake, now extinct, that lived alongside the Quin Kan and Megalania. Wonambi was unlike any snake we know today. It belonged to an extinct family of snakes known as Matsoidae, characterized by their primitive and somewhat inflexible jaws, as well as their enormous size. Wonambi was one of the largest in this family, reaching lengths of up to 6 meters, comparable to a large Burmese python. Luckily for us, Wonambi broke the Australian trend of being venomous. However, its size made it a powerful killer that likely hunted in a manner similar to modern constrictor snakes. That is, it ambushed its prey near bodies of water, attacking by surprise and then squeezing it with its powerful muscles until the blood stopped flowing to the brain or heart, incapacitating the prey. But here's where things get even more gruesome. Unlike modern snakes, Wonambi had a relatively inflexible and smaller head, which prevented it from swallowing its prey whole. This might sound like good news, but in reality, it made it even more terrifying. Instead of swallowing its prey in one gulp, Wonambi would tear it apart with its sharp teeth and powerful body, sometimes even disemboweling it. It's not the most pleasant way to die, and it may have been a fairly common experience for early Australians. In fact, one study found that in some present-day indigenous populations, attacks by constrictor snakes are a common cause of death. So while Megalania and Quincon were certainly terrifying, Wonambi was no slouch in the race to be the most lethal predator in ancient Australia. Ever wonder how mammals could survive in a world full of reptilian predators? Well, the answer is simple. The mammals of that time were just as fearsome. The best example of this is the Thylacoleo, a mammal that stood out for its massive size, being the largest mammalian predator known in the history of Australia. To give you an idea, average Thylacoleos were as large as European wild boars, but the biggest ones could compare to adult lionesses or tigresses. However, this wasn't a feline, not at all. The Thylacoleo was a marsupial, a close relative of the koala, but unlike its sweet cousin, the Thylacoleo had a smaller brain, which, curiously enough, was an advantage. This allowed it to have a skull with much more room for dense muscles and strong bones, giving it the most powerful bite, relative to its size, of any known mammal. Paleontologists estimate that a medium-sized Thylacoleo could bite with the same force as a lion 2.5 times larger. This incredible strength allowed it to hunt massive prey, up to 15 times heavier than itself. And not only that, but it did so in a unique way thanks to its teeth, which consisted of elongated incisors similar to canines, perfect for piercing flesh. In addition, it had large molars that resembled actual blades, capable of cutting the trachea, spinal cord, and arteries of its prey, causing a quick and lethal death. This hunting method was so efficient that researchers believe the Thylacoleo could kill its prey in less than a minute, while an African lion might take up to 15 minutes or more to do the same. And if for some reason its bite wasn't enough, the Thylacoleo had another lethal weapon, massive retractable claws on each of its front paws. These claws were connected to semi-opposable thumbs, allowing it to easily maneuver them and deliver deadly blows if necessary. These claws were also curved, suggesting that the Thylacoleo could climb trees and rocks, possibly dragging its prey to higher places, much like modern leopards. Additionally, this climbing ability allowed it to move deftly in rugged terrain and caves, adding another layer of danger to this already formidable marsupial. In prehistoric Australia, life wasn't just a challenge because of the terrifying predators lurking around every corner. The herbivores of that time were also formidable creatures, capable of standing their ground against any threat. Among these giant herbivores was a creature that at first glance might seem harmless, but was actually a beast of epic proportions, the Diprotodon. The Diprotodon wasn't simply a large wombat, it was a colossus in every sense. This marsupial, which is the closest relative of today's wombats, was so massive that it could have cast a shadow over an Asian elephant. Weighing up to 3.85 tons, this herbivore was, in fact, the largest marsupial mammal to have ever existed. To put this into perspective, imagine a modern wombat which rarely exceeds 30 kilograms, multiplied by over 100 times. The Diprotodon was a true titan of the Ice Age. Despite its colossal size, the Diprotodon wasn't a predator. Its diet consisted exclusively of plants, leaves, and grasses, making it a strictly peaceful vegetarian, or so it seems, because while it didn't hunt for food, this giant was equipped with a formidable weapon, a bite so powerful that it could easily crush a human femur with a force of 11,000 newtons in its rear molars. This fact gives us an idea of how dangerous it might have been to face one of these giants, especially if you got in its way. But why would an herbivore need such a strong bite? Well, in the harsh prehistoric Australia, even herbivores needed to be ready to defend themselves. The Diprotodon, with its large size and powerful bite, was perfectly adapted to protect itself from the giant predators that shared its environment. Additionally, its enormous body not only provided protection, but also the ability to migrate long distances in search of food, which was essential in a continent where resources could be scarce. But the prehistoric fauna of Australia wasn't limited to giant mammals. Birds also reached impressive sizes, and none demonstrate this better than the Genyornis, a bird that could easily have been the protagonist of any prehistoric hunter's worst nightmare. The Genyornis, which lived until about 50,000 years ago, was part of a group of flightless birds known as dromornithids, also nicknamed thunderbirds for their imposing presence. This name is no coincidence. The dromornithids were gigantic birds that could rival the size of the mythical terror birds of South America, although they belonged to a completely different family. The Genyornis in particular was an impressive creature. It stood up to 2 meters tall, meaning it could look an adult human directly in the eye, or even surpass them in height. Weighing up to 250 kilograms, this bird was a true tank of feathers and bones, with a strength and durability that made it practically invulnerable to the attacks of many predators. Despite its intimidating appearance, the Genyornis was, surprisingly, an herbivore. However, this doesn't mean it was harmless. With a powerful and sharp beak, as well as equally impressive claws, this bird was more than equipped to defend itself from any threat that came too close. Its robust bones not only gave it an intimidating look, but also allowed it to withstand the assaults of the predators of the time, ensuring its survival in a world full of dangers. The Genyornis, like other thunderbirds, is a reminder that in prehistoric Australia, even herbivores and birds were creatures of epic proportions, adapted to survive in one of the most hostile and challenging environments on the planet. By now, it should be clear that ancient Australia was the last place you'd want to travel to in time. But in case there was any doubt, remember that almost all the dangerous animals that inhabit Australia today were present back then, along with many other extinct creatures we haven't mentioned, like giant turtles and other extinct crocodiles such as the Palomnarchus. If all this wasn't enough, nature itself took its toll on the continent, with extreme droughts and relentless weather, and despite all of this, humans not only survived, but thrived in this hostile environment. In fact, there is evidence that they hunted many of the giant creatures we've mentioned today, suggesting that in the end, perhaps we were the most terrifying animals of all in those times. So, next time you think about Australia, remember that its history is even more terrifying than the spiders, snakes, and crocodiles that live there today. From land-dwelling crocodiles to giant lizards and colossal birds, this continent has been home to some of the most formidable creatures that have ever existed. But despite everything, humans managed to survive and dominate the land. If you enjoyed this journey through time and the terrors of prehistoric Australia, don't forget to give it a like, subscribe, and leave a comment with your favorite creature from the list. See you in the next adventure.